He knew before anyone else did. That is the part that shook the organization most deeply. Not the hospitalization, though that arrived with the specific, cold shock that medical emergencies carry when they involve the person your entire competitive structure is built around. Not the announcement about two-way play, though that landed in the baseball world like something structural had shifted. Not even the massive contract with the Twins starter, though that transaction carried its own weight and its own implications for what the Dodgers believed they were preparing for. What shook the organization, what produced the specific, unsettled quality that people inside the building carried for days after the full story emerged, was the timeline. Ohtani had known something was wrong with his left arm for 3 weeks before he told anyone. 3 weeks. Of preparation. Of bullpen sessions. Of starts where he stood on a major league mound and threw pitches at velocities that require a left arm to perform at the absolute outer limit of what human physiology allows, while knowing, with the quiet certainty of someone who understands his own body with extraordinary precision, that something inside that arm was not right. He had kept pitching. And he had kept the secret. Until the morning he couldn't. The hospitalization happened without warning from the outside. That is how these things happen when they have been managed privately for long enough. They arrive at the surface suddenly, as if from nowhere, when the reality they represent has actually been building for weeks beneath a surface that was being maintained by will and professional discipline and the specific stubbornness of someone who has decided that the work is more important than the discomfort. He woke that morning with pain at a level that exceeded what he had been managing. Not dramatically different in kind from what had been present for weeks. Different in degree. Enough that the threshold he had set for himself, the internal line between manageable and requiring attention, had been crossed in a way he could no longer rationalize past. He called the team physician directly. Not Roberts. Not the training staff through the normal organizational channels. The physician. Directly. At a number he had saved for situations that required bypassing the layers of communication that surround a player of his stature and reaching the person who could tell him something true about what was happening in his body. The physician came to him within the hour. The evaluation that followed lasted 40 minutes. And at the end of those 40 minutes, the physician made a call of his own. To Roberts. Roberts arrived at the facility to find Ohtani already being prepared for transport to the hospital for imaging. He stood in the doorway of the training room for a moment before entering. The people who were present describe his expression in that moment as the expression of a manager processing several things simultaneously: concern for the person, concern for the team, and underneath both of those, the specific quality of someone who is realizing that a situation he thought he understood has turned out to be something he didn't fully understand at all. He went in. He sat down next to Ohtani. He said, "How long?" Ohtani looked at him. Roberts said, "How long have you known something was wrong?" The silence that followed lasted long enough that its length became its own answer. Roberts absorbed that length. Filed it. Moved past it to the practical reality of what needed to happen next. He said, "We'll talk about that later. Right now tell me how bad it feels." Ohtani told him. Roberts nodded slowly. Then said, "You should have told me." Ohtani said, "I know." 2 words. Without defense. Without the elaboration that the situation might have invited from someone less willing to sit in accountability. Just the acknowledgement. Clean and direct and complete. Roberts said, "We'll figure out the rest. You focus on the imaging." The imaging results came back that afternoon. They were not catastrophic. That distinction matters enormously, and the Dodgers communicated it carefully in their public statement, making clear that the injury, while significant enough to require immediate attention and a meaningful adjustment to how Ohtani was being used, did not represent the kind of structural damage that had derailed his career once before. Inflammation. Nerve involvement at a level that explained both the pain he had been experiencing and the specific mechanical changes that the coaching staff had been observing in his delivery without fully understanding their origin. Manageable. With rest. With the right treatment protocol. with the adjustment that Roberts announced publicly the following morning. Two-way play suspended indefinitely until the medical staff determined that the arm had recovered sufficiently to handle the demands of pitching at major league intensity alongside the offensive workload that Ohtani's presence in the lineup requires. The six-man rotation announcement came simultaneously. A restructuring of how the Dodgers would manage their pitching going forward, a response to the reality of Ohtani's absence from the mound that required the organization to redistribute innings across a staff that had been constructed with his contribution as a foundational assumption. The Twins starter's name was James Kellner. The contract was the number that everyone reached for first. The financial commitment that the Dodgers made to acquire him told the baseball world something specific about how seriously they were taking the gap Ohtani's pitching absence would create. This was not a depth move. This was not a plug-and-play solution designed to cover innings while something else was figured out. This was a statement that the Dodgers believed Kellner was good enough to anchor a rotation that had just lost its most important arm. He had spent 4 seasons in Minnesota developing into something that the Dodgers' analytical team had been tracking with increasing seriousness, a pitcher whose surface numbers understated his actual effectiveness because the context in which he had been pitching obscured qualities that their proprietary evaluation systems could identify and quantify. His fastball played up in high-leverage situations in ways that the standard metrics didn't capture. His breaking ball had a shape that the Dodgers' hitting staff, the people responsible for preparing their own hitters against future opponents, had flagged as among the most difficult to square up in the American League. Roberts introduced him briefly, said the right things, and then moved the conversation, with the efficiency of a manager who has too much to manage to spend extra time on any single item, to the question everyone was actually waiting for. The secret Ohtani had kept. A reporter asked it directly. Said, multiple people inside the organization have confirmed that Ohtani was aware of the arm issue for a significant period before the hospitalization. Can you address that? And can you tell us what his reasoning was for not disclosing it earlier? Roberts was quiet for a moment. Then said, I can tell you what he told me. He told me that he believed he could manage it. That the pain was present but not at a level that he felt required him to remove himself from a rotation spot that the team needed him to fill. That every start he was able to make was a start the team benefited from. And that telling us would have resulted in exactly what has happened now, which he was trying to delay for as long as he could. The reporter said, do you understand that reasoning? Roberts said, I understand it completely. I don't fully agree with it. But I understand it in the way that you understand something when it comes from a place of genuine care for the people around you rather than from self-interest. He paused. He said, Shohei wasn't hiding it to protect himself. He was hiding it to protect the team. There is a difference. It doesn't make it the right decision. But it matters that I understand why he made it. Another reporter asked, has it changed your trust in him? Roberts looked at the reporter. Then said, my trust in Shohei Ohtani is not a variable that fluctuates based on individual decisions. What he did came from the same place everything he does comes from, complete commitment to this team. The form of that commitment was wrong in this instance. The source of it was exactly what I have always known it to be. Ohtani addressed the media from the hospital. Not in person. Through a written statement that his representatives released in both English and Japanese simultaneously, a brief, unadorned document that contained none of the carefully managed organizational language that surrounds most player statements in sensitive situations. He wrote, I am sorry for not being transparent sooner. I believed I was making the right decision for the team. I understand now that transparency would have been the right decision for everyone. I will be back. I am already working toward being back. I ask for patience from our fans and trust from my teammates. I will not waste either one. The statement was 4 sentences. Each one earned. In Minnesota, James Kellner was packing the last of his belongings from a locker he had occupied for 4 seasons. He was doing it with the methodical efficiency of someone who has been a professional long enough to have learned how to close one chapter and open the next without letting the transition accumulate more emotional weight than it needs to carry. A reporter asked him, on his way out, what does it mean to be joining a team in this specific moment, with Ohtani sidelined, with the rotation restructured, with everything the organization is navigating? Kellner stopped. Considered the question seriously. Then said, "It means they need me to be real. Not to fill a role. Not to manage innings. To be real. To compete at the level this organization expects and this moment requires." He picked up his bag. Said, "I've been preparing to be real my whole career." And walked out the door.